A Human Rights Watch report released on Thursday said that Nigerian authorities have largely ignored ongoing sectarian clashes, fighting between Christians and Muslims. The findings resulted in about 3,000 deaths since 2010. Nigerian authorities reject the report's findings, and joining us to discuss the report is its author, Rona Peligal. She's Deputy Director of the Africa Division of Human Rights Watch. It is Peligal?
It's Peligal, but I have to say that I'm not the author, I'm the editor.
Oh, editor, okay.
Yeah.
It's not a big difference.
It is.
But let's get to the heart of it, which is 3,000 deaths. And so in your report, you have testimony from witnesses who say that they went to authorities when their relatives, when their loved ones were killed, and the perpetrators are still walking the streets. And that's kind of at the heart of this report, isn't it?
That's absolutely right. And that's one of the reasons why this is so tragic. There are times when crimes happen and there's no information. In this case, there were victims who said, I know the perpetrator. I saw that person kill my father or slit the throat of my child. I can identify that person because he or she lives in my community. And then the authorities did nothing to follow up, or did very little at least. And that's one of the reasons this is so heartbreaking, because these are 3,000 deaths just in the last 3 years alone. And there's a cycle of violence that keeps repeating itself.
Yeah, the Nigerian government talks a lot about its trouble with Boko Haram in the north, and that it's a military and a terrorism struggle. Do these 3,000 deaths fall into that category, or are they just crimes?
This is an entirely separate category. This is there are different swaths of populations in Nigeria. This affects the Middle Belt, so Plateau and Kaduna states. And we are talking here not just about common crime, we are talking about massacres that have taken place, and there is impunity for those massacres so that the people who perpetrate them are not investigated or brought to justice. And then the communities feel so aggrieved at the loss of their loved ones that they then take matters into their own hands and say, we're going to avenge these deaths and we're going to kill all the Christians or kill all the Muslims. It takes on very ethnic and religious overtones.
So what is the disconnect between the government of Goodluck Jonathan and this phenomena, this tragic phenomenon in the north?
I think part of the problem is that the police have a reputation to be corrupt, as we have documented in Human Rights Watch reports, and that the public officials are afraid of taking action because they fear that there might be retribution if they hold somebody to account. And so sometimes there's a calling of a commission of inquiry, and then nothing happens. It's just let to lie fallow, except that the abuses then continue.
Do these taking place in regions that have any oil in it?
No, this is not the oil-affected regions. These are regions that are in some ways the fault line between Nigeria's Muslim north and predominantly Christian south. And so they're particularly precarious for that reason and have been the site of violence for 2 decades at least. But we were very surprised at how little the government had done to try to stem some of this violence. It's not the same thing as the Boko Haram violence, by the way, but Boko Haram has sometimes said, we are seeking to avenge the death of our Muslim brothers in Plateau and Kaduna, for example.
Right. There was a huge reprisal by Christians, I think last year, where they went and they attacked Muslims in the north, and it didn't exempt women or children from these attacks. So it's definitely, it seems at its base, a recruiting tool for Muslim extremists.
It's interesting that so many of the victims are women and children, and the report has photographs and there's a lot of documentary evidence showing how ordinary people are affected by this. These are not militants or people who are politically active. These are people who, were killed because of their essential religious or ethnic identity. Okay,
we've talked about a great deal about what has happened. So what does Human Rights Watch suggest happen now?
Well, we're calling on the government to, and the police in particular, to ensure that there are investigations of the perpetrators so that all the proper leads are followed up on, and that investigations are done the correct way. Very often after these kinds of incidents, the police will just round up everybody, but then they won't really properly collect or maintain the evidence that they have. So we are calling for improved investigations as well as prosecutions of the people who are most responsible for the thousands of deaths that we have seen here.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.